one thing that I want to tell everybody, which was told to me by senior parents, is that things get better. You know, when you are a young parent and when you are handed something like this, because you can't see autism, and the manifestation starts to come धीरे धीरे, और हर एज के साथ में कोई ना कोई अलग चीज होती है. So for example, अगर 8 साल से पहले meltdowns हो रहे थे, suddenly 8 साल पे बंद हो गए, and you were like, wow, meltdowns are gone. If they were sitting intolerance till age, you know, the child is running everywhere, and you know, he's not sitting for any therapy, any class. With intervention, that starts to happen. But when the diagnosis comes, you are not thinking about what is going to happen. Like for example, I had never realized, I had thought that, you know, my child will never be able to go to a school. I had thought that, you know, he'll never be able to lift a pencil. He types now, and he's moderately autistic. He's still semi-verbal. But, you know, I think there was balancing of expectations. And that, I think, is extremely important. Because what happens is parents, either they expect too much or expect too little. It's both a disservice to the child.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the India Autism Center podcast. I'm your host, Sakhi Singhi, and I'm so glad that you're here with us today because we're joined by a very special guest. Today, we have Mugdha Kalra, someone who wears many hats, a celebrated journalist, an award-winning author, and also an inclusion activist, and most importantly, a mother. Mugdha's work as a mother has really shaped and brought so much change in the way that we perceive inclusion today here in India. Mugdha continues to inspire, and I'm so grateful to have her here on this podcast today. Thank you for being here, Mugdha.
Thank you for all the nice things you said.
All true.
Very kind of you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm a huge fan of the work ISC is doing. I wish there were more centers like ISC with more heart and spirit, and the work is incredible. So hats off.
Thank you. So I'm just going to dive right in. And you have been such an inspiration when it comes to being vocal about inclusion, being vocal about being an advocate for people with autism. And I would like to know how and where in your parenting journey did you think that you need to voice this?
I think what is most important in neurodiversity or in a family that is touched by neurodiversity is that you definitely need help.
Okay.
You definitely need help in feeling more inclusive. You need help in intervention. You need partners in education.
Yeah.
And nothing will come to you if you don't ask. And nothing will come to you if you don't choose to help yourself. So I think for me, one of the biggest learnings was that people are inherently nice. But if you don't tell them anything about your problem, or if you don't speak to them about what you're going through, they will not have the bandwidth to understand, to help, and you will never be able to strike an inclusive conversation or be in the same space. And I think my training as a journalist sort of helped me with that because you enter journalism with a sense of vocation. Yeah, then it becomes a profession, and you do a 9 to 5. But I think television and where I was at that point, where I was at point in time in my career, I felt that when I took a sabbatical to take care of my son, I was dying to talk to somebody who understood. It is very easy to meet somebody and say, oh, my child had a meltdown and that's why I'm delayed. They have no idea what you're talking about. It's only somebody who has been in the same journey or is aware of
So you said you took a sabbatical for your
Yes.
son. When did you realize that your child had a condition? Like, when did you realize
At
that?
4.5.
Okay.
And perhaps the red flags were there from perhaps 3 years on. But, you were in denial because he was otherwise absolutely fine. Only his speech milestone was delayed. So he wasn't talking as fluently as other children his age. And that is when we started to think he's different. But then you also embrace the uniqueness. You say, maybe the child is introvert. Maybe he's not as social. You got to give him time to blossom. And it was at one of the school interactions for admissions where this happened. And I was livid. I was very upset because uh, that is not how you give somebody a diagnosis. And now I also speak to, when I speak to therapists, when I speak to doctors, I always say, please gauge where the parent is in their level of understanding, in their level of awareness, in their level of absorbing that news before just handing it out to them. It's like telling somebody, tumhe cancer hai.
But the person who gave you that diagnosis,
Yeah.
were they qualified to give that to you?
I think, in hindsight, I think she was a young girl. She was qualified. She was one of the counselors. I just think she was young. And
Yeah.
perhaps she didn't have that agency at that point in time. But so was I, And although I did not say anything, I just heard her. I came back home, but I was very upset. And rightly so, because I was not prepared for this, right? The way of telling me could have been, your child is showing some development delays. Why don't you go meet a developmental pediatrician?
Yeah.
Or if he needs speech therapy, do you want to perhaps go to a doctor? And then we can see, if he can support him, because this was an inclusive school. But when you say autism, you will think about, now when you say autism, what would you think about? You'll think about a film like Barfi.
Yeah.
You will think about, you won't think about Elon Musk.
No.
You will not think about any other, you won't think of Einstein. You will think, or you would not think of anybody you have met who is neither Einstein nor is, somebody who is pervasively autistic. But, is just a person, a regular person. But because you have no idea that autism is such a huge spectrum at that point in time, your mind races to the worst outcome.
Of course.
And I think that took me by a storm.
Did you know what autism was?
I knew autism, but I did not know that there was a spectrum.
Okay.
So for me, overnight, my child became autistic, right? And it's so important to separate the label from your child, because my child was my child. He was still playing. He was still somebody who I was looking at with so much love, and I was cherishing every moment. And then suddenly somebody tells you this, and you start thinking about life. Ab kya hoga? Ab aage kya hoga? Of things that don't even exist.
Yeah.
So it alters the way you parent. It alters your subconscious in such a huge way if you're not prepared to take the diagnosis. And that's why I always say that it takes a while for even the best of us to absorb what is happening and what the outcomes will be.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you're enjoying this conversation, and do subscribe to our channel. It'll really help us to stay connected. At India Autism Center, we're building this unique ecosystem. Our residential program, Samavesh, provides lifelong care to individuals with autism and other related conditions. Our training academy, Manan, is set out to create jobs for those interested in caregiving. And our research department, Khoj, is set out as well to collaborate with professionals and like-minded organizations to really revolutionize autism research. If you're interested to be a part of this resolute community, please do reach out to us, because we're interested to get in touch with you. So feel free to drop in a note either on the comments or reach out to us on info@indiaautismcenter.org, or check us out at our website, which is indiaautismcenter.org. See you. So you mentioned something that was take the label away from your child. That understanding must have taken
Huge while.
a really long time. If you can give us a little bit of a peek into the challenges and the rewards that you have gone through while parenting. Can I take his name?
Of course.
Yeah, can I parenting Madhav?
Yeah.
It would just be very insightful for the audience to know how they can see through these little moments and maybe get that realization themselves.
I think one thing that I want to tell everybody, which was told to me by senior parents, is that things get better. That things change dramatically. You know, when you are a young parent and when you are handed something like this, because you can't see autism, right? And the manifestation starts to come धीरे धीरे, you know, और हर एज के साथ में कोई ना कोई अलग चीज होती है. So for example, अगर 8 साल से पहले meltdowns हो रहे थे, suddenly 8 साल पे बंद हो गए. And you were like, wow, meltdowns are gone, you know. If they were sitting in tolerance till 8, you know, the child is running everywhere and, you know, he's not sitting for any therapy, any class. With intervention, that starts to happen. But when the diagnosis comes, you are not thinking about what is going to happen. Like, for example, I had never realized, I had thought that, you know, my child will never be able to go to a school. I had thought that, you know, he'll never be able to lift a pencil or a pen. He types now.
Wow.
And he's moderately autistic. He's still semi-verbal. But, you know, I think there was a balancing of expectations. And that, I think, is extremely important. Because what happens is parents, either they expect too much or expect too little.
Yeah.
It's both a disservice to the
So,
child.
on that note, you know, I have never heard you say moderately autistic before. You've spoken about Madhav so many times. I've never heard you say that. And the reason that I'm going to bring this up is just this weekend, I met a parent, and I keep bumping into these parents who I don't really know their parents of individuals who have, you know, a disability. There was this crowd, okay? It must have been like a 1,000-person event.
Oh, wow.
She took me to the corner and she said, look, you know, my child is autistic. The second thing she said after that was, but mildly. Okay, but mildly. And I've met another parent who said, my child has autism, but he's high functioning. Can you shine some light
Okay.
on this?
Mild, moderate.
Mild, moderate, high, severe, not severe. Because I have read literature which is like, don't say this and don't do that.
Absolutely.
And I've always heard you also never say this.
I
You've
never say that.
mentioned it.
Yes.
But I just want to take that up.
It's a very good question, Zaki. It's a very good question because a lot of times parents, when they discover that the child is autistic, the entire world is after them to find out कि अब इस बच्चे में सुपर पावर क्या है. कि क्योंकि ये ऑटिस्टिक है तो इसमें कोई ना कोई टैलेंट होगा. You know, half my life with Madhav's disorder has gone telling people he's a regular kid. He's showing no talents whatsoever. You know?
Did you take him to the casino as well?
No, I haven't. But yeah, he used to have those. He used to have those moments where he would be standing in front of the balcony and he would say "light guy," and you know, 2 minutes later the light of the building in front would go. So you know, unexplained things. But yeah, but having said that, no, he's not showing
Maybe
any
he just
signs.
like pulled out a plug from somewhere.
Yeah. But to your question, all right. So, you know what happens is I have once autistic, always autistic. And it doesn't matter whether it is severely autistic or it doesn't matter whether you have Einstein syndrome. You are autistic. You're different on the autism spectrum. And when I say moderate, I am talking about support needs. So, if you are mild, you should say with little support needs.
What are these support needs?
The support needs are, does the child need your help in crossing the road?
Okay.
Can the child take decisions on his own? Does he need help in activities of daily learning? And, you know, can he be left alone to go from one place to another in a cab? You know, you have moderate support needs, which means आपको accommodations चाहिए, आपको किसी का साथ चाहिए, and at the moment आप उस level of independence पे नहीं पहुंचे हैं जहां पर आप ये कर सकते हैं. Moderate support needs also come in education. So for example, when you say mild, right, that means that with a little accommodations from the education system, the child can do CBSE, ICSE, state board, IB, whatever. But when you're talking about moderate, you are saying that he needs a different curriculum. Perhaps the child needs a curriculum that is suited to his level of agency and understanding. So for instance, I have taken Madhav completely away from any kind of certification, which means there is no pressure of an exam on him, because we did that with NIOS, which is again not built for children with special needs.
You really think so?
Absolutely, because NIOS at the moment is only meant for people who have fallen somewhere in their journey of educating themselves.
Okay.
Or it is for people who have transferable jobs. It's a great model for people who have the who have the intelligence and can be perhaps homeschooled. That way, you're homeschooling your child at home.
Yeah.
At the same time, you're not putting the pressure of them going to school,
Yeah.
which a lot of times, because of bullying, because of lack of teachers understanding the child's disorder or problems, is not, the child is not happy in school. So it's great. I say this, that, homeschooling is perhaps a very good model, and iOS then works for it because you have the time. But I don't think Madhav needs to learn about caveman. He doesn't need to know कि पत्थर को वो करके उन्होंने आग जलाई थी.
Right.
I need to tell him कि बेटा आग जो है उससे तुम जलोगे.
Yeah.
गैस को बंद करना है तुमको.
Right.
गैस चलानी आना चाहिए.
Right.
Those are the things that are functional. I need to tell him that. So that's where. So moderate means that, support needs.
Right.
And those moderate support needs can tomorrow be lesser support needs. But until and unless you speak about the needs, you will not be able to help your child. For example, if this parent were to go and tell in school, कि मेरे बच्चे को autism है लेकिन बहुत mild है, chances are the child may get admission. But because you have said this, he may not get the kind of he may not get the kind of intervention, a mental intervention from perhaps the school, who will be careful if you had said, my child is autistic, but he's functional, but he needs to be understood.
Right.
I think parents की भी एक वो हो जाती है, कि अगर डर भी नहीं, एक हो जाता है कि चलो अगर ये भी है तो इसमें भी मेरा बच्चा बेहतर है थोड़ा. Parenting and comparison, neurotypical world में भी है, neurodiverse world में भी है. So, the moment it so happens that, you have an autistic child, this also starts to happen कि मेरा बच्चा ऑटिस्टिक है लेकिन वो ये कर सकता है, मेरा बच्चा ऑटिस्टिक है लेकिन वो इधर है, तो
ICSE में ये किया वो but doesn't this put a pressure on these parents?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you have to say about that? Like, I just feel like even what you said, that you've not had Madhav do any of these certifications, do any of that, or put any sort of pressure on him. And there are parents who feel compelled to do that. Like, what are your 2 cents to give to those parents?
I'll honestly say, first of all, that I'm very grateful for the privilege.
Okay.
Right? My experience as a privileged parent is completely different from somebody who is not that privileged. If somebody is living in a strata where the child needs to find a job because they will not be able to support the child, तब वो कुछ भी करके उस बच्चे का सर्टिफिकेशन करवाएंगे. वो कुछ भी करके कोशिश करेंगे कि कोटा हो या कैसे भी हो, बच्चे को हम किसी तरह इतना लायक बना दें कि वो अपनी जिंदगी अपने आप रन कर सके. So I completely understand that, because I also come from a place of privilege where I know that, I can take care of my child or introduce him to others, or maybe, he can find ways of meaningful work without certification, right? Having said that, this certification business puts so much pressure because parents को लगता है 10th ही पास कर ले. आज 10th के बाद में, tell me one person who gets naukri.
No one.
Nobody gets naukri after 10th. So why are you making the child work so hard? Versus if you can make the child do something vocational, do something brilliantly there, and, if they have picked up art, or if they have picked up fitness, or if they have picked up, mechanics or anything, if coding, इतनी classes होती हैं. अगर आपको आपके बच्चे का skill पता चलता है, और अगर आप उसी skill में उसको push करते हैं, the world is moving to a place where certificates don't matter. It is what you are bringing to the table in terms of performance, in terms of ideas, innovation.
Right.
That's what matters.
So, why then do you think parents put this unnecessary pressure on specifically their children who have these support needs? Is it something going amiss? Maybe they can't communicate, which is why they're thinking of it.
I think parents don't understand autism very well.
Okay.
Even if you get the diagnosis, I'll tell you in my case, my husband is extremely supportive and a great dad. But does he read about autism? No. It so happens that एक parent पढ़ता है तो दूसरा parent automatically उसके ऊपर depend करता है. So the fears that he might have are very different to the fears I have, and then I become that sounding board for him. Right? So I will tell him, no, but I read this and this has happened. Now imagine where neither of the parent is reading anything. Right? There, you are just handling a diagnosis. You are just saying कि हाँ autism है, लेकिन वो autism का क्या prognosis होगा आपको नहीं पता है, या उसकी क्या intricacies हैं आपको नहीं पता है, और शायद आपकी bandwidth नहीं है. You feel so overwhelmed reading about it. So I don't blame the parents, but at the same time I also tell them that you can't be a cat who shuts the eye and thinks that अब मुझे कुछ नहीं दिख रहा है तो शायद दूसरों को भी मैं नहीं दिख रही हूँ.
Yeah.
So you can't have the ostrich syndrome here. You will have to educate yourself. And when you educate yourself, then you start to figure that there is something called executive functioning, which is deeply flawed in our children. उस challenges होते हैं. For example, I figured out via OT that my child has difficulty moving from one activity to the other. कि transition में उसको problem होती है. That has made my life so easy, Saki, I can't even begin to tell you. If he is on his iPad painting,
Yeah.
right? And if his fitness teacher is standing outside, yeah? अब कलेश हो जाएगा कि तुम चलो बाहर जाओ, टीचर आ गई हैं, बाहर जाओ, जाना है तुमको, you are not listening, you are not. And that is what will happen in the house with the staff and everybody else if I'm not around. But if I am seeing and I'm seeing he is coloring, till the time he will not finish that, he will not transition to the next activity. If you know these little things, your life becomes easier and you don't put that kind of pressure. Because I know, जैसे ही वो खत्म होगा, he will shut it, he will wear his, because he likes structure as well.
Yeah.
And only when you educate yourself is when you understand how your child's mind is working. When you start working at their pace, in the way they are learning, the learning becomes super easy. Now imagine exam है, exam का stress है. अब वो बच्चा जो है वो अपनी कोई एक्टिविटी कर रहा है, उसको ट्रांजिशन करने में मुश्किल होता है, उसको मैथ्स से साइंस पे ट्रांजिशन करने में मुश्किल हो रहा है कि अभी तक मैं मैथ्स पढ़ रहा हूँ और अब आप कह रहे हो मेरे को साइंस पढ़ लो, अब तुम कि अब तुम इंग्लिश पढ़ लो क्योंकि बिकॉज कल परसों में टेस्ट है, एग्जाम है. मेरे को ट्रांजिशन करने में प्रॉब्लम होती है. Same people when they grow up,
Yeah.
find it difficult to transition from one assignment to another. It needs a lot of mental prep. When you start understanding how your child performs, or what his triggers are, or what can bother him, or what works with him, what kind of environment do you need to give him for a one-on-one learning, things become much easier.
And the only way to do that is either self-learn or go to a person, go
Who
to a
can guide you.
professional who can guide you through it.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Absolutely.
If you're enjoying this podcast so far, please consider liking and subscribing, and it really goes a very long way for us. Mugdha, I have a question which is about emotional regulation and meltdowns. And for parents who are having a really troubled time
Yeah.
with emotional regulation,
Yeah.
how did you navigate the world of emotional regulation and meltdowns? Because that's something that parents keep on asking us on our Instagram, on our Facebook, on some guidance. And I think no one better to really guide them than a parent themselves.
It's a tough one because meltdowns can be very tough. And if they're happening in a public space, it's even tougher because all eyes on you. Right? I think one of the things is grow a thick skin. If the meltdown is happening, don't worry about what 50 other people are thinking. Because, you stop taking your children out because of that. You stop traveling because of that. But a meltdown can happen in an airport. It can happen in a mall. It can happen in the school. It can happen anywhere.
Has that happened with you?
Absolutely. And it happened to me once in a mall where interestingly, a pub was right outside the playpen.
What?
Yeah, so they were all on the same floor. तो वहाँ play area है जहाँ बच्चे अपना खेल रहे हैं.
That sounds like a good business model.
Yeah, you can leave your child here and you go have a drink. So I think maybe that's the reason why they would have done that. And Madhav refused to get out of the playpen. right? उस टाइम पे मेरी ये लर्निंग नहीं थी कि
transitioning
में मुश्किल है, ये भी लर्निंग नहीं थी कि इतना लाइक you become so conscious of where you are. It was what, $200 for being in that playpen. I could have just paid 200 more. Again, reeking of privilege, I know. But I would have made my peace there. कि
Right.
चल ठीक है, तुम रहो वहां पे, मैं I'm
घूम के
buying
आती
you
हूँ।
time, I'm buying transition time, and then I'll say, now I give you 5 minutes, now it's 4 minutes, Madhav, now it's 3, 2, 1, and then you come. You learn the hard way. माधव जी फैल गए वहां पे, उनको निकलना नहीं था, एंड और उस टाइम पे तो they don't want to listen to the mother or anybody. So there was very thin line between whether it is a tantrum or whether it is a meltdown. So that difference
Explain the
also.
difference to me, please.
Okay, so tantrum is when you can reasonably talk to somebody and negotiate. A meltdown is when they do not have any control over their emotion. So at that point in time, even if you give them the best reinforcer, even if you try to soothe them, calm them,
Nothing helps.
they can't control themselves. And happens at younger age because there's sensory processing, there's too much happening, and they don't know how to stim or self-regulate at that
Yeah.
point in time. Yeah. And this happened at the playpen, and just then a bunch of really drunk men came out. And mother was screaming, and the guy started shouting at me, shut the child. Why is he shouting? Usko chup karao. आप उसको डरा रहे हो, आप हटो, मैं जाता हूँ. And
God.
and then ultimately the security guy noticed that I was completely in a flux. He just came, he lifted Madhav from there, and he took him. I said, ma'am, aap mere saath aiye. Madhav also at that point in time, shock. So he quietened. So my first thing was, in a meltdown, you first need to understand when is tantrum moving into a meltdown. Secondly, when you are in a stage of meltdown, don't be socially awkward if it is happening in a public space. Grow a thick skin, only concentrate on your child, right? Third thing is, don't talk. That was one thing that I understood very late. If don't cry, Madhav, it's gonna all right. Madhav, kyun ro rahe ho? Yahan aao, nahi chup ho jao. He doesn't want to listen at that. So, we found music, and that is one thing. So, there is a tribe in South Africa that plays a certain music, a certain song of your choice as soon as you're pregnant. The entire pregnancy, you hear that song. It becomes your soothing avaz, right?
How interesting, yeah.
And then you grow, and when you're older, when the child comes out, they play that during the childbirth. They play that whenever the child is crying, so the song becomes like that. Music can be very therapeutic, and I have found, whether it is chants or whether there are a few songs, I find that when you play them subtly during a meltdown, that helped me. So music played an important role. Less talking played an important role. At that point in time, you also have to save yourself, So you have to learn tactics wherein the child is not. So, you don't stop the child like this. You hold their wrist like this so that it doesn't move,
Yeah.
And you surround yourself with cushions, so that you can give compression to the child. If there is too much light, you dim the light, and and then talk to the child, because if there is stimulation happening, or आँख के सामने अगर आपने आँख पे हाथ रख दिया, या म्यूजिक बंद कर दिया, या जो भी आपको लग रहा है उस टाइम पे, अगर मान लो म्यूजिक नहीं पसंद आ रहा है, then take that call, because the child will tell you. Which is the reason why it's very important that first, be calm yourself. Second, don't worry about who's watching, who's listening. अगर घर में भी हो और बहुत जोर से आवाज आ रही है, ठीक है, it's all right. It's your own house. It's his own house.
Right.
He needs to be himself.
Of
right?
course.
So these were the things that really helped. Obviously, that phase ended. And another difficult phase came in when Madhav was transitioning. He's still transitioning hormonally. And in hormone transition, what happens, the meltdown can take form of rage. And the rage meltdowns, when they happen, there could be hitting. and the child is stronger, right? So a lot of times, so when we had our first episode, obviously, this was a child who never hit anyone, and the first thing he did, he threw something off the table, he pounced on me, he hit me, and I was taken aback. And it took me a lot of while to come to terms with what had happened and to talk about it, because no one talks about it. No one talks
No one
about,
talks about it at all.
and nobody will tell you, because it qualifies as domestic violence.
Yeah.
Right? So nobody will talk about it. But it is so important to talk about it, because there are ways in which you can monitor this.
Yeah.
There are ways with which you can reduce it.
And I feel like the intention goes absolutely. People miss. They get scared about how someone else will judge the intention
Yeah.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with all this, I learned that having a great behavior therapist helps.
Yeah.
And the behavior therapist works with both you and the child.
But Musa, there's so much, with behavior therapists. I'm sure even you're aware. There's just this great, what do you call it? Like, against behavior therapy. There's
ABA and yes.
movement against behavior therapy.
Yeah.
What is your take on that?
I speak very strongly for all the therapies that are there, because I feel that everyone requires therapy based on their level of autism and their level of support needs and their learning. So, for example, if I have somebody who is going to be able to manage themselves with lesser support needs, can be included in other schools with accommodations, etc., perhaps I will not recommend ABA for them, because ABA is rote learning. ABA is
almost managing and suppressing a
exactly
lot.
That you work for a reinforcer, and you are rote learning, and you are learning to repress or suppress. Having said that, it works very well with children who need repetition to understand a simple chore. So for example, with Madhav, ABA extremely well worked to trigger speech, because they were doing reinforcer मिलेगा तभी you will तुम बोलोगे तभी reinforcer मिलेगा. No speech therapist was able to help me. No language therapist was able to help me. But when at 4.5, Madhav went to an ABA school, speech came like that. As in, Abibi, he is semi-verbal, but manding, as they call it in ABA, to ask, came like that. मुझे दे दो, मुझे जाना है, मुझे करना है, नहीं चाहिए. All of this, the basic conversation skills came from ABA. So what I always say is that not one therapy fits all. So what may work for your child may not work for mine. And what is working, for a child like Madhav, if ABA worked. So when you get into a therapy, get in with a goal, but if you're not getting results, get out of it. Try ABA. It might work. If it doesn't work, if you're thinking your child is rote learning, take him out. Who's holding you, by your collar and saying कि नहीं तुमको यही कराना है अपने बच्चे के लिए.
Yeah.
So I say that you must try everything that is accessible, easily available, and judge it for yourself. Do not go by somebody else's experience of ABA. And one other thing that I always speak about is neurodiversity. Again, is a spectrum where one person can look at celebrating their autism, and at the other side, there are people who are diseased with it. There are insomnia, there are gut issues, there are seizure issues, there are, issues with comprehension. How do you expect a family or a person to celebrate that level of neurodiversity? So it's different. So
it really is. I'm so happy you brought this out. I'm really so happy, because we once had a parent who was complaining about the fact that the child had sensory issues, and the child would throw feces around, and the only thing that helped them was behavior therapy.
Yeah.
And for a parent like that, how do you tell them to celebrate autism or celebrate neurodiversity, right? They need to do whatever they need to find whatever therapy is available in their
Absolutely.
toolkit and make sure that that works for their child.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll celebrate my child. But do I celebrate the difficulties that autism bring? I don't. And that is something that, this community needs to understand, that is celebrating their neurodiversity, that your neurodiversity makes you think differently, makes you innovate, you can manage it. But my child is struggling with his neurodiversity. So I need to help him in whichever way to be the best version of himself. And if it is ABA, then so be it.
And sometimes you have to learn it the hard way, right? And I'm sure that learning it the hard way gives a lot of stress to caregivers and to parents. And you've written a book about this, which is I See You and I Get You. And thank you for this copy. And to those that are watching this podcast, another reminder for you to like, subscribe, and share this to whoever might find this useful. Mugdha's book, I See You and I Get You, we at India Autism Center have a lot of copies of it that we are sending out to parents, because this, I think, is the best self-care manifesto that is there for parents of children with special needs. Which then I want to transition into the fact that autism awareness, inclusion, all of this, where do you think it's headed? What do you think the future is, specifically in India? You do so much work around it. I want you to give a shout out to Bukosmia also. I want you to tell me where you think this is going, and also tie this up to the fact that where are caregivers going wrong, that they need this manifesto to start, you know, start helping them make their life go on a track that they envision.
I think the biggest problem in India at the moment is that we don't have data.
Okay.
When we don't have data, we don't have the right policies. You'll be surprised. There is big shout out to Vidhi Legal. They are a legal think tank, and they do papers on disability, on neurodiversity, and they have just recently come up with a beautiful paper which talks about the current state of laws, regulations, and rights for people with disabilities.
Oh wow! I have never heard of them.
It's an excellent paper, and if you read their paper on what the government has said about inclusive schooling in the country, you will be like, this is the best system that ever can be. Do you know
with
that
the Indian government?
The Indian government, you will be surprised. There is an app called Prashast app, which every government school teacher has on their phone and has to fill about what do they notice in terms of neurodiversity in their class. Is the child sitting in a circle? Is the child concentrating? Does the child have any needs?
Where is this happening though?
So, exactly. There is no implementation.
Okay.
I myself was very surprised and shocked. RPWD Act, the Disability Bill of 2016, they are all very solid bodies of legal work. There are rules and regulations, but nobody is following them. For example, do people know that if a school is asking you for shadow teacher, you can go to the disability commissioner of your city and say that this is what is happening, because they are not supposed to ask you for a shadow teacher.
Are you serious?
Yes. But what do parents do? आप हमारे बच्चे को ले लो, हम shadow teacher भी दे देंगे. According to the schools that are so CBSE, ICSE, even if they are private schools, but if they come under the government certification, and if they come under, and any other government school which comes under government subsidy, cannot refuse admission to a child under 14, irrespective of his disability.
I don't think parents know these rights.
They don't know this. And that's why this beautiful work has come out. And in fact, you should have them for the podcast. They are doing such exemplary work where they're saying, ये आपकी rights हैं, ये laws हैं, और अगर ये नहीं हो रहा है, this is the place you go for redressal. Who does it? Nobody. You can file an FIR against the school. But what will happen then? School will make life difficult for you. They will ensure,
make difficult for your child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think what is happening is we are losing on two levels. A, we don't have data, so we don't know what is the number of neurodiverse individuals in the country, which makes it difficult. Why are the deaf or hearing impaired or visually impaired people as a collective, as a disabled collective, so good in terms of getting rights for themselves? Because their disability is visible. विद इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटी सेंसस भी अगर हो रहा है घर में और अगर आपसे आके कोई बंदा पूछता है कि आपको कोई डिसेबिलिटी है आपके घर में, पेरेंट्स आर लाइक नहीं, मुझे बताना ही नहीं है कि मेरे बच्चे को ऑटिज्म है, क्योंकि वो तो थोड़े दिन में ठीक हो जाएगा, अभी वो छोटा है, माइल्ड है और आगे जाके क्या पता वो ठीक हो जाए. So they will not say. So there is data deficit. Data deficit है तो सरकार कहती है कि अभी तो इतने हैं ही नहीं इतने लोग. अब तुम लोग अगर इतने हो ही नहीं तो फिर तुम्हारे लिए हमारे पास बहुत लंबी लिस्ट है, पहले इन लोगों को हम पॉलिसी वो करेंगे, then we will look at
Makes
you.
sense.
So now disability. So 2016 is when the disability, the bill of 2016, the disability bill, it says there are 21 disabilities. Run a dibs in your run a thing in the center of how many people can identify those 21 disabilities. People don't know about the 21 disabilities, right? Even I may not be able to list everything offhand, agar main aise sochूं. So, lack of awareness. When people don't have any awareness, you start working on building empathy and compassion in their 20s or 30s. तब तक सारा mental makeup हो चुका है. तब आप सिखा रहे हो, आप develop नहीं कर रहे हो. You're educating them. You are shoving it down their throats that, this is what is empathy. This is what you need to do.
Yeah.
Right? When you start learning, so what happens? Why are these adults not being, are not trained in empathy? Because they don't see people different than them standing in their class.
So true. Yeah.
And if I, tomorrow, if I say that, मेरे बच्चे की disability कम है, आप उसको ले लो, you know what the teacher will say? Other parents will object. कि हमारा बच्चा जो है वो आपके बच्चे से ये सब करना सीखता है. The empathy levels are so low that even if you want your child to have an inclusive world, you don't even know कि मैं वो world कहाँ ढूंढूं. So that is where we are going. So awareness is, so the numbers are, diagnosis is increasing. That is the good one thing. अब diagnosis बढ़ रहा है, then
But care is not, right? There's no
care
place.
is not. We still struggle with centers. We are still struggling with what after me. We are still struggling with the government supporting caregivers with any kind of policies. You announce to your health provider that you have a disability, you have an invisible disability. Your insurance amounts of health insurance come down to 5 lakhs. That's it, 5 lakhs. What happens in 5 lakhs? Today, if you are getting 5 लाख से ज़्यादा तो आपको सीनियर सिटीजन गवर्नमेंट दे रही है आयुष्मान भारत में. What is happening with health insurance? A friend of mine who's now fighting for health insurance writes, her son was refused insurance coverage for pneumonia. How does invisible disability cause pneumonia or make you more susceptible to...
I don't even think they get insurance. Like, we did a financial planning episode where we had Pankaj Gupta, who's the CIO of Ratnabali Investments, and he said it's really, really difficult for folks with disabilities to even get investment. Insurance.
It's very difficult. So, lack of government policies, and that is because there is data deficit, so they don't know.
Right.
Lack of awareness and empathy, and then lack of intervention. So we are still getting there. In your bigger cities, with telemedication, etc., it still is working. But we need it. And, it's not like, it's only happening to people in the cities.
And the future, Mugdha? Are you optimistic?
I'm very optimistic. Primarily because I speak about autism. And so I'm optimistic about, I'm not worried about my child. When people ask me, are you worried about Madhav? I'm not at all worried. Because I will ensure that I, as an aware, educated parent, will do enough and more to find an inclusive set of people. I will ensure that, I am talking to 1,000 people and telling them, देखो ये autism होता है, ऐसे होना होता है, ये मेरा बच्चा है, we are making an inclusive world. I will drag you in my world. But it still is a huge struggle for the not so privileged in the country who live in dur daraz ke ilakas where आपको डेवलपमेंटल पीडियाट्रिशियन तो दूर पीडियाट्रिशियन भी मिलना मुश्किल है और ऐसा नहीं है कि वहां पे नहीं हो रहा है वहां पर भी एनवायरमेंटल फैक्टर्स की वजह से
There are a lot of cases,
lot
like
of
diagnosis.
cases
Yeah.
lot of diagnoses that are coming and I think as a society there is still a lot of pressure on children to perform on you as a family you want to portray a picture जो कि that is the only difference between a big city parent and a small city parent. Small city parent में वहाँ पे आपका joint families हैं, आपका community इतना strong है कि बच्चे पल जाते हैं.
Right.
And they are fine. They get inclusion. That inclusion is missing in lower middle class, and even upper class. You know, upper class people make their own worlds.
Yeah.
Where they live in a cocoon, right? But this section is where you feel the differences. So that's the reason why awareness is the most important.
And you think
piece.
that's increasing and that's coming up in the future?
It is, thanks to people like you who are so
And to you,
committed,
thanks.
who are so committed. But, we always feel that, impact ko kaise aap multiply karo. How do you find that multiplier effect? So that's the thing. That's why we ask everybody, I was at a summit where we were talking to filmmakers and we said that, you have representation of caste, you have representation of LGBTQ, you have representation of, the stratas of the society. Why are you not, and you do so much work on gender, where you're trying to show women of all
We've
shades.
really come far in that, but there's very
Absolutely.
little that...
So, introduce neurodiversity subtly. Introduce neurodiversity in your characters. Look at what one Tare Zameen Par did for
a lot of people.
Look at what, Barfi did for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, we need more initiatives to come forward and the will to make a difference. So we need a lot of allies. So that's what we say that, we are nothing without our allies. We are nothing without people who support us. So as a parent, as an advocate, I also feel my duty to go seek help. Because if I'm not choosing to help myself by accepting help, then I am depriving myself of a world that awaits me, which is much more beautiful when everybody around me is understanding my needs and helping. People are inherently good. Society is inherently good.
And Mugdha, that brings me to the last segment, which is why did you write this book? Why do you think this book is important to so many people?
When I started writing, when I started talking to people on my social media handles, I was getting so many questions and I was getting so many DMs and people wanted to talk that, I used to feel कि मैं नहीं कर पा रही हूँ, मैं इतने सारे लोगों को जवाब नहीं दे पा रही हूँ, and I think their questions were so innocent and I wish I could just hug them and tell them, what,
you'll be okay.
ये नहीं, ये मतलब, it'll all be fine. You don't have to be this way.
Did you have someone do that for you?
I think there were a couple of senior parents I approached who were phenomenal, and they have done such a brilliant job in telling me that, Gopika, who started Buddy Up, she looked at me and she said, why, if I had it my way, I would have never made my son do certification. And that's what triggered me. And, I was like, yeah, why am I wasting time? So, when I meet other parents, I'm like, don't do this. And this learning helped me when in Madhav's school, I told them that, I don't want certification for Madhav. Can we have a section that does not study for these board exams? They can study for exams that you hold because, that will be part of the assessment. But for certification, I don't want. Can you imagine? There were 10, 15 other parents who wanted the same thing and they started a section which now doesn't follow these certifications. So, that's what. So, you learn from somebody else's learnings, like, when I met senior parents and study and spoke to them about rage, most of them were like, yeah, it happens. I was like, then why the hell nobody is talking
Yeah,
about it?
true.
It becomes so easy कि अगर मेरे experience से तुमको पता चल जाए कि अरे भाई ये चला जाएगा phase, या ये होता है, या
And
seizure आ
these are the
सकता है,
strategies to deal with it.
you are at least not thinking, oh, my child is dying. The first time my son had a seizure, I knew he was having a seizure because it's possible. But, as a parent, I was also very, very, I was like, am I losing my child? What's happening to my child? But at the back of my mind, I also had कि ये हो सकता है, because, I have spoken to parents who have
Who are
told
open
me
about it.
कि seizures होते हैं. That learning, and I think that was one of the reasons that, all right, if even 10 parents can read this and can financially plan well, can have their own life. I have gone through a phase where in those 4 years of sabbatical, I thought I will never work. I will become a housewife. And for me, and I'm not saying this in any other dissing way, because, I know the job of a homemaker is absolutely important. But, I started working at 19. My entire identity was attached with my work, which also I learned during my sabbatical, that it's all right. You are a complete person if you're not learning. I mean, if you're not working, but if you're learning, and if
You keep going.
and you're driven, you don't need a job to validate you. But those learnings are so important, because only when you learn and you unlearn is when you can help others. So, I think it gave me comfort of detaching my professional validation and professional identity from myself and still feeling like a whole person. And at the same time, when I started to work, it also gave me hope that there are tons and tons of mothers out there, women out there, who can find work, who can find their life back, if it was defined by work, and you can still
I
do
love
that.
that in this book you also have a chapter that says, I see you, dads.
Yes.
I really like that. So, for parents out there, we have limited copies of this book. And if you are anywhere in India, in fact, if you're a parent or an educator that would like to educate their parents about it, reach out to us and we will ship a book to you, but be quick. Get this book because it has everything from, financial planning to meditation to strategies that you would need to actually emotionally regulate yourself to be a better parent. So thank you so much, Mugdha, for writing this book.
Thank you.
And some closing thoughts that you have for us, for parents, for this community in general. Just
I
closing
think
thoughts.
all I can say is, if as a caregiver, you have educated yourself, you have embraced this new change in your life, if you are taking care of yourself, and if you're living your life, you will never have a moment where you're worried about your child. Until and unless you are taking care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And I feel that a caregiver, a parent's mindset is so important in handling a diagnosis of neurodiversity, because at the end of the day, neurodiversity is not the end of the world. It is an introduction to seeing life with a different lens. I can't begin to tell you the joys that the neurodiverse parenting brings to me. I can't even begin to tell you how much I learn from my child. And I can't even begin to tell you how much I appreciate his differences from other children. Because neurotypical parenting is no cakewalk.
Yeah.
It's not easy. But because I have chosen to prioritize myself, sometimes over my child as well. And I can do that sometimes feeling guilty and sometimes not feeling guilty. But until and unless I choose to prioritize myself, my relationship with my husband, I'm not a co-parent, I'm a partner. And that is something I speak in the book very, very strongly about. It's a teamwork. And also, you married each other because you loved each other and not because you wanted to just raise a child together. That you can do with anybody, right? But that relationship, when that starts to get affected, when your relationship starts to get affected with your friends, what do? Until and unless you prioritize your life, and then if neurodiversity is part of it, you will enjoy it. But if you don't do it, then it'll become a chore. You will resent it and you will have more hardships. So take care of yourselves. That is the most important thing. And once you have taken care of yourself, everything else will be fine.
So true. You can't pour from an empty cup, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mugdha, thank you
Absolutely.
so much for being here today. It's always such an honor
Oh,
to have
please.
you be associated with us. And you keep doing these webinars, you keep doing these small little things for India Autism Center. And we're so grateful to you because I feel like your journey as an advocate has been so inspiring to not just the India Autism Center, but to the parents around, to the
True.
community that's watching. Even the books that you write, Bukosmia, the initiative that you
Yeah.
started, it's just beautiful. You're really making such a big difference in the lives of so many that I
Thank
can't
you.
thank you enough for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so
Which brings
much.
us to the end of the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in today. Leave your comments, and we will get back to you again. We have very limited copies of this book, so please reach out to us and we will ship it to you if you are somewhere in India. Thank you all for tuning in today to the India Autism Center podcast, and we will see you until next time. But don't forget to watch one of the videos that are popping up on the screen.